Welcome back to the Warcraft news. We have a lot to talk about today. Thanks to a calendar event on the alpha, we actually might have a late release date for midnight. We've also got a tweet from Holly promising the beta to be sooner than we may have thought, and loads of amazing alpha updates, including something that will make healers happy. Hopefully. But of course, it would not be the Warcraft news without a bit of controversy. That's because this week's alpha shipped a huge change, and it is one that will either save WoW dungeons or doom both DPS and healers forever. Blizzard seems to have this problem more often than they really should, but basically whenever this week's alpha came up, there was a placeholder world event in the database, and rather curiously, they have different regions and dates. But they all last from late January to early March, and as Wowhead points out, they last for 6 weeks, and 6 weeks is pretty much the length of an in-game pre-patch event. And they actually point to something kind of unsurprising, and that is a release date. A release date of Tuesday, the 10th of March. That would be with the pre-patch being on the 27th of January. Now, if this surprises you because Blizzard's own pre-order page said June 30th at the latest, let me explain. They're basically, when they say that, making sure that they don't accidentally lie to you whenever you're making a pre-order purchase. Basically, if they said that they were releasing in March at the latest, and then something came up forcing them to delay, it would put them at substantial risk. That's why those things they put in their website are always extremely conservative. And right now, Battle.net's refund policy says you can't get a refund, and it has in-game content that is immediately redeemed, things like the level boost and Trader's Tender. But if they missed that date, then you could potentially argue for a refund by claiming that they breached their own advertising terms. So by announcing it with the 30th of June, they essentially have wiggle room to do a delay without really having to worry about the financial impact of loads of people doing refunds. Anyway, March 10th. Save that date. It's very likely to be the date you'll be playing this expansion. Unless, of course, something goes terribly wrong during the beta. And speaking of the beta, we're close to that. Holly managed to break herself free from playing Legion Remix to do a tweet. She talked about her new druid, but importantly said, beta soon. And I know soon doesn't really mean a lot, but I think I do know what she means. Take a look at this. They laid out here a beautiful looking roadmap for the alpha with 5 phases. Now, the 5th and final phase is this week. So once that's over, yeah, we would actually expect the beta. And that means you should go to the Warcraft site and opt in for the beta if you want to check it out. The other thing you could do is go and buy the Epic Edition because that does guarantee you'll get beta access, but it doesn't guarantee you'll get it immediately. But essentially, if you're asking me, beta's probably going to start next week. And another thing, she did say tinker in the tweet. Yeah, the word tinker was there. So who knows, maybe that means we are getting the tinker class later on in Midnight. If so, then you heard it here first. But speaking of what we're actually getting in Midnight, well, how does a full new set of raid frames sound? Because apparently, they listened. The complaints from healers about losing the likes of Cell and Healbot did not fall on deaf ears. Being real, the current in-game frames completely blow for healing. So what Blizzard have done is they've finally shown off improved raid frames. And there's a lot of improvements. These look just that little bit nicer than before, but with huge upgrades. We have new highlights for dispellable debuffs, new layout options, vastly improved buff and debuff tracking. Certain debuffs can actually be flagged in Blizzard's end, things like tank swap debuffs, and those will be made more noticeable. So it should actually, surface information to you in a way that's actually actionable. But there's more than just that. There's something else massive as well, and that is that major defensive cooldowns will be shown as well. Now, that being said, not everything's perfect. There will not be whitelisting or blacklisting, and that has rubbed some people the wrong way. Basically, Blizzard are kind of keeping their line in the sand here. They're essentially saying, we decide what information is important. I totally get people not liking that, but at least with it in mind, these do look like a substantial improvement. I mean, even take a look at this new line of sight indicator. It's extra nice, I would say. And remember, this is only the first iteration. So overall, a lot of people were worried, but in dropping this screenshot, I think Blizzard have just allayed a lot of fears. But they've not allayed all of the fears. Blizzard also used this opportunity to address a few more things, like, as an example, their new extra text-to-speech alerts for a ton of non-combat states, but also the types of things that they want add-ons to be capable of. Now, the examples they gave are of boss warnings, where add-ons will be able to add custom events like break timers to the boss warnings. They can also create cooldown bars just like the old DBM and Bigwig's default. Then another huge feature they want to save is custom nameplate styles. which honestly I think's a pretty huge one personally. Now they say that add-ons will be able to tell when a cast is labeled as important by the game, and then, seeing that, they can animate or maybe change the bar differently to how the game would do it itself. Now the add-on wouldn't be able to say, if this specific ability is used, then change the visual. No, what it's able to see is simply, has Blizzard marked it as important or not? So not full customization, but basically, if you want an extremely highlighted bar that will tell you something really important that you need to know, then an add-on should actually be able to do that. It just won't be able to highlight a specific spell that Blizzard don't flag as being important. And as it turns out, because of another bunch of changes, this feature may be even more important if you are a DPS. Because guess what? Congratulations! You've got a new job. Tell me if you've heard this before, that healers have just been massively nerfed heading into dungeons, but that also the dungeons are taking that into account. All for the healers' good. We really do seem to go through this cycle just about every expansion. It's happening again, but I think it's happening to a far greater degree than almost ever before. So, Blizzard have removed healer interrupts. So DPS players, congratulations, you're in work. Healers are freed from the burden of doing interrupts. But obviously, this is controversial, and a lot of healer mains are absolutely crashing out at it. So, in a blue post, Blizzard said that healing is stressful, that watching enemy cast bars was a little too much on top of everything else that healers have got to do. So because of this, they removed everyone's interrupt except for Resto Shaman's Wind Shear, but Wind Shear has got a 30-second cooldown now. Kinda wild. Now, they do say they're going to adjust solo content so that healers will actually be able to solo things even though they don't have regular interrupts. Or in most cases, interrupts at all. Wild. Honestly, this is kind of crazy. It's caused absolute chaos, and I totally get why. And it's for one major reason. This does not actually make healing less stressful, guys. It really doesn't. Now, on paper, it does diminish an area of responsibility, and that lets healers focus on their healing. But in reality, it will make healers' lives harder, at least in my opinion. You see, a lot of healers are basically saying that now they're terrified of Mythic Plus, because they can't trust their DPS players to interrupt. See, that's the thing with healers. Yeah, DPS players sometimes shitbrain and don't do things, so the healers end up stepping in to help. And because of that, the healers actually got to have successful Mythic Plus runs. The worry for the healers is they're going to enter the same world of dungeons with DPS players who, haven't really taken on their new responsibility, meaning that they are just going to have to be forced to heal through the consequences of people not doing interrupts because they themselves can't do the interrupts. And it's further compounded by an age-old truth that player health bars are a healer problem. Even if the DPS player is standing in the fire or has missed an interrupt, no. The health bar hits 0 and health bars are the healer's problem. Now, obviously, that's not even close to true, but let's be real, that is how a lot of flaming goes in dungeons. And because of this, some high-end healers are basically calling this a complete destruction of skill expression for healers, all in an expansion where they're already being pruned and simplified. And the fear is that healers will now just be spamming heals in dungeons instead of using their other utility and fun tools. Now, obviously, some other people are pleased, because they see this as Blizzard trying to get more people into healing. Of course, doing that by saying, hey, healers have got less responsibility, and they are a bit more simple. Reduced barrier to entry. But in a vacuum, it seems that this, while it maybe has some good intentions, is quite a misguided idea. But the good news is it's not in a vacuum, because in the same breath, Blizzard posted their plans to change mob casts in the Midnight expansion. This is huge. So here goes. Whenever ranged enemies cast bolts, which are basically just those targeted spells that chunk players' health, well, now they will make an effort to evenly spread the damage across players. So you see, right now, bolt slop packs have got a rather horrible tendency where they're all just lock on to the same person with multiple bolts at once. A bit like clicking on an Age of Empires NPC and clicking the delete button and then just going, oh! Yeah, a bit like that, but for, a DPS player. Now, this would lead to a lot of people needing massive weak auras that basically scream at the target so that they can pop their defensives to survive. So the hope is that by removing that behavior, they should also remove the need for add-ons basically existing to get around that problem. And it should also be less punishing if casts go through, because they'll be more spread around. In theory. That sounds quite good to me, but I actually think the change could go either ways. Maybe DPS players will learn to interrupt. Maybe more healers will feel comfortable playing the game. Or maybe this will make healing more stressful, because one of the most important things to mitigate stress is to give people a sense of agency, because that basically says to, our monkey brains from the trees in the savannah, oh, that's okay, I can solve that problem. And that means that you don't feel despair, right? But in a world where Blizzard have taken away some of your tools to free you from the burden of needing them, well, what happens if you end up in a situation where you still feel like you need them, but now you don't have them? What you have there is more stress, and that could be bad. The worry then is that if your fate is in the hands of a Beast Mastery Hunter who's got his game muted and Netflix open, well then this is just going to be more stressful for you. Now that being said, the good news here is that the Midnight Dungeons already feel lighter on cast so far, so hopefully this does not result in the exact opposite of what Blizzard wants it to. But hey, at least Blizzard are also giving you some new add-on replacing tools. One of them is this, External Defensives Tracking. Basically, there's a new buff tracker that you can turn on for externals. Like with everything else, this is the Blizzard version. You can't choose what it tracks. Blizzard will just set the list of externals, and then this will show you when those things are active on you. Certainly less powerful than an add-on, but everyone will have it, and it should mean no more double defensives on you by accident. The second thing they've added is raid buff tracking, where basically if someone in your group doesn't have a raid buff that you can apply, it'll glow for you. And there's another one as well. Whenever someone dies and you have a battle res available, your battle res will actually glow to alert you. So what we basically see here is that Blizzard are really on the add-on replacing crusade. And they're on that, especially this week, with us seeing all of these new tracking things as well as the game's new unit frames. So at this rate, I would expect even more next week in the alpha's final phase. Once alpha ticks on, it will be in beta, and that's when I'd expect to get less new features and more just them polishing up what they've got for launch. But speaking of alpha, Blizzard have just made a bit of an alpha move, but not on the alpha. They've actually done it on the PTR for patch 11.2.7, where what they've done is they've kind of went back and destroyed loads of Shadowlands lore that people didn't really like. It's actually more complicated than that, but seriously, if you're into the lore, if Shadowlands shook your faith in things, then you have got to watch this video next, because it is them undoing and fixing up some of their worst story mistakes, and they're setting up a future that genuinely looks better.